we are more looking into, just like appreciative inquiry, we're looking not at what's wrong in someone or a couple or family or a nation or a community. We're looking at what works for it. So appreciative inquiry, believe it or not, is a business model. But I see families and couples as a business of love, okay? When I ask a couple in therapy, what's your mission? What's your mission statement? Did you write your vision statement? What's your vision? They don't have a vision. So I'm thinking of that, but they're not on the same wavelength. And that's what is so important. And it's part of the 5 strategies of compassionate love. To know how to break away from the chains of all the programming that we receive if we take good consideration of the other. We honor the other. We respect them. And we know their pain. And their pain is a reflection of what we might not want to see and might not want to honor. And so when we are in the appreciative inquiry, we understand that life has its affirming moments in a human system. That's where we can change the world.
This is the Gifts of Trauma podcast. Stories of transformation and healing through compassionate inquiry.
Welcome back to the Gifts of Trauma podcast. This is Jem, and I am so delighted to be here today with Dr. Josiane Bonté. Welcome, Josiane, to the show.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you for having me. I feel so honored to be here in this specific time in our lives. And I'm honoring all of our common ancestors in the world, all of our connections with everyone in the world. That by sharing this ancient material with you about compassionate love is to bring this new and ancient DNA awakening that's in us and that's being buried because of all the patterns of separation, division in our world that we are programmed in right now. So we have to awaken and feel safe and go within in order to actually tap into what we have already in us.
If we were at a party, if me and everybody listening to this show was at a party right now, you would be the one who came by with the tray and you would waft this tray in front of us with all of these decadent, delicious looking things. So many words that you just shared are, to me, the appetizer to what we're about to get into today. Words like compassionate love, appreciative inquiry, family systems. These are all familiar words, but I know they don't mean the same thing to me as a compassionate inquiry trained practitioner, and they probably will not be familiar to our audience. And so I want to take some time to become familiar with what is your map in your work, Dr. Josiane. But before I do that, I just want to acknowledge this beautiful being in front of me. It was so exciting to dip into your work, very rigorously academic and also metaphysical at the same time. So before we really get into definitions and operational ways of understanding what you do, I just want to hear from you. What is your mission? What are you here to do right now?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. So my mission is literally to go into the darkness of every single human being and bring them into the light. That's why I call myself a light worker. So I am officially a couple and family therapist, but I call myself a light worker, as guided really by spirit to bring for everyone to see the sparkle or the divine in every single being in order to stay away from judgment and for us to bring into our reality more compassionate love, which is unconditional love and compassion. Okay. And those two words came about in 1999. Lynn Underwood and her colleagues had a meeting in the World Health Organization in New York with multitude of scientists, economists, spiritual and political leaders. And they could see at that time that there was a lot of confusion, violence, just like right now. And they asked themselves, what does the world need the most right now? Nobody could settle for one or the other. So they said, we need more compassion. And others say, no, we need more love. No, we need more compassion and more love. So they say, okay, let's have a functional definition and bring compassionate love. So they created compassionate love as the love that centers on the good of the other. And Lynn Underwood has a sense of humor, which you need in science, says that it's basically the type of love that doesn't give you indigestion in your stomach. It's real love. It's pure love. It's cosmic love. It's even quantum love nowadays. It's the type of love, it's the type that's within us that we use like to the minimum because we're not taught anywhere how to love. So we hear a lot, the world has used the word love in so many different circumstances and contexts and misuse. And so compassionate love is really not the type of love that asks you to sacrifice yourself. Often there's a discrepancy. People are think about compassion. No, don't give compassion. You don't want to give yourself away from the other. You don't want to get in this interconnectedness and wholeness principles. In African Ubuntu philosophy, it's not about I, it's about we. I am because we are. In the Western world, we say, I think, therefore I am. You see the difference? And I will go back to the African philosophy often because a lot was taken from Africa, but not correctly recognized. And some parts of what we need right now, we need to go back to the source in order to remind us who we are. So if we say everybody come back from the same source or from the same place, but who we are is a question. And that is the essence. This is the difference between being in a survival mode when you see intimate relationships or the world is in survival mode right now with a lot of fear, confusion, conflicts, misunderstandings, abuses.
You're already starting to give me some of that delicious context that you write about that is so important. Definitely, I want to land where you are right now. But there's just a couple of things I would love to go back to and revisit that you just said. The first one that really stood out to me was that compassionate love does not require us to compromise ourselves. And I see a parallel in what we learn in compassionate inquiry. Because for me, before I embarked on this journey, compassion was giving myself away. It was bowing down. It was literally making myself smaller in service and in offering. And going through the year long and the mentorship of compassionate inquiry did for me was it brought me back to myself. And it teaches you that as we listen to somebody, as I'm listening to you, I'm paying attention to how I feel every step of the way. And I'm trusting that because that's going to allow me to mirror truth back to you about yourself. So I'm feeling a lot of parallels Of course we were going to, but I wanted to name that one. I was wondering if you wanted to say anything back around that because I'm watching you shake your head yes a lot.
You're naming exactly what it is to be feeling compassionate love. Is you mirroring. We are connected beyond the space and time. We are connected somehow. When we came through our mothers, we decided, hey, on February 12, 2025, we'll meet again. And that's what every time we see somebody, even a cashier at any supermarket or an Uber person or whoever is in our reality, in our space, they are a reflection of ourselves. They are mirroring a part of ourselves. And that is what compassionate love is teaching us, to not feel upset, anguish, scared of the other, because they are part of ourselves that we might have buried or disowned or repressed or suppressed from our consciousness. So our consciousness, we always think that our consciousness is, we're using all of it, but we might use maybe 10% or less of what it is to be in that unity, love consciousness. To be spiritual, to have the spirit in us and to let it talk, to be in our essence, is to allow compassionate love to lead us, not our fear, not our anger, not all those emotions that are part of what it is to be human right now in this 3 dimension.
Me and maybe a lot of people listening right now love to live in this metaphysical habitat that you're describing, but it's hard to land these concepts into practiced, lived reality. And as a scientist, as somebody who has 2 decades of clinical experience, and really just the story about the World Health Organization in 1999 giving way to that definition blows me away. And you're opening a door for us to peek into, and they're talking about that at the World Health Organization. So I want to know more about the science that establishes and affirms what you're saying right now. And one of the foundations I think that we should talk about next is talking about family systems, because a lot of us know about internal family systems developed by Richard Schwartz. My mind went to that when I read it. So let's talk about, what is family systems? How is it different? And how does it too begin to get us out of this individualistic approach to healing?
Yes. So family system came in with a bunch of different scientists, psychiatrists, psychologists, and also anthropologists. Like Gregory Bateson was a big leader of family systems, because they were seeing at that time the psychotics, the family of psychotics, and they were working directly with them. And they noticed that the communication is off there. And it's not just the one member, the one that shows the actual symptoms, is actually also the family members, the parents and the siblings of that person. And so they agree that, oh, wow, we have to then depart from the scientific method that tells us just to see one person and to encapsulate more of the bigger picture of what is that person about. And that person is about relationships. We are in a web of relationships. As humans, we cannot be separated or isolated from others, because our brains function in relationship with another brain. So that's the science of neurobiology that we incorporated in family systems. So we decided to go away from the diagnosis So we don't diagnose, although I was a mental health counselor at the roots. I step away from diagnosing people. It was liberating to understand that humans have the capacity within themselves to self-regulate with themselves and others, whoever is around them. Okay. So the difference between family systems and let's say individual therapy is we don't diagnose and we reframe. If the person, let's say a child, is seeing his parents in conflict, so the child could be acting out in school. And he's acting out in tandem because his parents are acting out. But it might not have the words to say, hey, there's something wrong right now. I can feel it, but it's difficult for me to voice it. So a child is going to actually act out what is seeing in another space. And parents usually bring their children as the source of problems, but don't bring themselves into therapy. And usually in family therapy, then we include the parents because they are the source. They are the tip of the pyramid. Who is supposed to be the one leading the other to show themselves in their essence and not in their survival mode? So the survival mode is what some call the ego, or some might call the dysfunctional part of ourselves, the neurotic part of ourselves, if we go into the Freudian psychoanalysis. But it's all very prevalent. It's very real. We get every single one of us, even though if we think, well, we are nice, we are kind, but we always have a moment where we're going to be in our lowest vibration because of what's happening around us.
As you're talking, the picture that's coming into my mind is, first of all, the emphasis is on the communication between more than the subject, like a signal. It's the signal. And the acting out child is just showing what their signal is picking up. It's not inherent to their being, their constitution.
And that's where the whole misunderstanding of, okay, I'm bringing my child to fix something about my child. So it's showing the child or the person as wrong, as something less than, but that's not the case. We should be very thankful and grateful for the children who are closer to their incarnations, their past incarnations, and they bring a lot of wisdom to us.
Yeah, again, I'm seeing a parallel with compassionate inquiry and what Gabor specifically talks about and names in addiction. Is it often the addicted person in a family or the one with ADHD? They're the sensitive one often that is trying to show the ill health in the dynamic. Instead, it's turned on them as if they are the ill one. So I hear that. And I also am getting very inquisitive about bringing in the parent and recognizing. I read something in your book that said this is about the brain specifically and about the regulation you're talking about. Researchers have referred to limbic regulation or affect co-regulation, which is the interaction between two people or more that occurs simultaneously when one person, knowingly or unknowingly, regulates himself with the other and generates healing through the creation of new neural pathways.
Yes, that's a lot.
That is really enticing to me. Once I got into the waters of your writing,
Yes.
I tried reading it to my partner and his eyes crossed. In case other listeners are feeling that way, can we break that down?
So I'm going to break it down with what James Baldwin said, that if we didn't have each other, we'll be dead. But because of the love for each other, and it was talking about specifically the African American population in the US. The love that we feel for each other aliments our brain, and it creates literally new neural pathways. There's an emergent property that comes out of me being with you right now. And that is what we call like an entity, but it's a positive entity. It's our relationship right now. And that is what's happening in an intimate relationship, that being together, even when I'm having the worst time, is still feeding my soul, my spirit. And that generosity of spirit comes because of your presence. I feel called to name Hedy Schleifer. She talks about presencing, as she call in also imagotherapy, which is a therapy for couples that you sit across from each other, and instead of talking, you just in the presence, and you just gaze into the eyes of the other as gazing into the soul of the person.
You've driven us right to where we really want to be, because this conversation is about intimate relationships and the capacity, the implications that they have for collective healing. So I just want to open the floor right now to talk about this thing that you name called the sacred link.
Yes.
What is the sacred link?
Yes. Thank you. So while I was studying family therapy, family systems, and was interacting with so many different families from different cultures, different socioeconomic backgrounds and whatnot, I noticed that we all are spirit, body, and mind, or mind and body, right? And then in intimate relationship, though, it translates differently. So there's still the spirit of each partner, but there's also this mind. And it feels like bigger than man. It feels like the emotions. It feels like the love. It feels like something that really, when couples come to therapy, they come with a problem, but they don't come really with their essence. And being a light worker, I have to delve into to bring them back into their essence. And the first thing I ask is, what are some of the qualities that you appreciate in your companion? And they're very surprised.
I just want to say you're pointing to something else you talk about a lot, is this emphasis on deficit, right?
Yes.
And that's where the world is right now. That's what's contributing to what's making it feel really scary with climate, with politics, with a lot of health issues with people, is this deficit focus. So can you just spend a little more time
Yes.
talking about how important this shift is and what it means to you and what it's meant to the people you work with?
So what has happened is we come from a culture of deficit. In science, we focus on what's wrong, on the problem, on the actual issues. And it's difficult then to get to the core, to the root of what is that we're supposed to do with it. And in family system, and there's also a portion of family system that says we are more looking into, just like appreciative inquiry, we're looking not at what's wrong in someone or a couple or a family or a nation or a community. We're looking at what works for it. So appreciative inquiry, believe it or not, is a business model. But I see families and couples as a business of love. Okay. That's where we can change the world. If we take good consideration of the other, we honor the other, we respect them, and we know their pain, and their pain is a reflection of what we might not want to see and might not want to honor. And so when we are in the appreciative inquiry, we understand that life has this affirming moments in a human system. So it could be in an organization, a family, a nation, it doesn't matter. It's all the same. As long as it's more than one person. Otherwise, that person is in isolation. So when appreciative inquiry came about in 1987, David Copperrider was looking at helping an hotel who was doing really bad. And he asked the employees to go look outside in other hotels and see what works. And when they went, they came back and they were so excited. It's, oh my God, they are so nice with their customer service. They're welcoming every person, almost like in a festive mode. And it's so beautiful and amazing. We want to do the same. Appreciative inquiry is to see the positive core at the beginning. You know who you are, but to see the positive core in every person. Just focus on it, not to see only what's wrong. What gives life? So we to life affirming paradigm versus starting from what's wrong. And that's literally what trauma, I have to bring that component also, that trauma is teaching us. Trauma is a big world. Everybody's talking about trauma now. We can do trauma-informed yoga now. But trauma is a wound. And we as human beings get an experience. And we have a tendency to say, oh, that was a bad experience. That was a good experience. But actually, all experiences we have are teaching, helping us to expand our consciousness within the universe, within our space and reality, in order to move and ascend and elevate and bring our soul to a better role, to a better idea of what is it that we're here for. And that's the mission.
That just led us into what appreciative inquiry is.
Yes.
Getting away from the deficit and getting into that field, possibilities,
generative creativity, that when you are with someone, there's something else. There's a synergy of energies, of dynamics between you and the person that brings another entity. I like to say entity because it's live. It's moving. It's not dead. Even when people think that they're not changing, they're just changing for the same thing because they're not really putting their intention. And I love the fact that we started with setting our intentions, because that's exactly what I do also when I first have an individual, a family, or a couple with me in therapy. I use intentions. I ask them to say their intention.
Yeah, the intention is everything. It's like when you quoted James Baldwin, and without each other, we die. Without the intention, there is no compassionate inquiry session because it's the North Star. And I want to really get into what you started with, talking about sexuality and naming sexuality as part of the sacred link. What is it about sexuality that has this capacity? And more specifically, why do you believe so much that it's through our intimate partner that we can address collective healing? So let me just frame this with one of your quotes, because I want the listeners to really appreciate how fierce and how bold your belief and your statement is that's driving your work. I'm going to read this from your book. Without cultural integration and the understanding of the multi-generational transmission processes, sexual mass violence and mass trauma effects from the slavery system and current institutionalized racism hold American couples as hostage of the dark times in American history. Couple research can end the culture wars and the excess of humiliation, shame, and guilt that couples of color in this population carry, consciously or not, for the fragility of the perpetrator's descendants, disseminated through literature and media. And I would also say disseminated through a lot of unconscious behavior in day-to-day microaggressions.
Yes.
So this is painting a picture. And my hope is that we're going to lead into your specific intention to work with couples of color and what brought you to that. So I'm going to drop off right now.
This quote, this is so essential. It's at the core. You're right. It's at the core of what my mission is, for us to understand that everything that our ancestors have done, whether you are considering yourself as white or as black or enslaved ancestors, it doesn't matter. They all can mingle together because all we are is energy. All of what's around us and us ourselves, we are energy. That energy infiltrates into the core of ourselves. Yes, our bodies calls. We have memories from not only this incarnation, but many more, depending if you're younger, older souls, but they're all stored into ourselves, into the energy of what we live, the experiences. And so the past enslavement of one group of people and the one who have perpetrated the sexual mass rape, the abomination that is used as a weapon of mass destruction and oppression, not only because the Europeans did that, but it's all over the world now. It has infiltrated all layers of at the energetic field, every single human, because we're connected. Remember, just imagine the fish net, and those nodes are every single one of us. And we're connected beyond time and space in this present life. I started doing this study in 2013. And then 2017, we have what? We have the Me Too movement. Realizing that, oh, wow, it's not just one person, it's many more women and men that are being sexually abused. Why? Because if you go back to the source, the sexual energy is the strongest force in the universe. The whole universe is in perpetual creation and it co-creates with us. So when we're not intentional, when we're not conscious, we're letting other energies, entities do with us whatever they want. That's why it's so important. When I ask a couple in therapy, what's your mission? What's your mission statement? Did you write your vision statement? What's your vision? They don't have a vision most of the time. So I'm thinking of that, but they're not on the same wavelength. And that's what is so important. And it's part of the 5 strategies of compassionate love. You know how to break away from the chains of all the programming that we receive that we're supposed, first of all, to get married. We just noticed that Finland and all the Norwegian or Nordic countries are doing well without being married, so to speak. They live together. And they're the happiest, based on studies, they're the happiest population in the world. Why? So it's not about marriage per se. So I'm from France, right? And in France, we accept cohabitation as a very honorable and official way of being in a couple system. In the States, I learned through friends and my clients that they marry and remarry, but they're really learning about how to divorce and not to discover one another and go to understand first the other and to want the best, the greatest for the other, because the other is reflecting part of us that we might have not accepted or rejected. And when we see the other and we are like, oh, I love this amazing way of you, Jay. I feel that you are so centered. And then I might feel I'm not centered. But if I see it in you, it's because it's also within me. So it takes one to know one. It's so important that when you call in people and you see their flaws or you see their qualities, it's because you have them in you. That's why we don't need a guru. We are our own gurus because within us is all of the universe. We are all of the universe. We are what Maya Angelou took from Terence. Everything that's human is in us. So we can be this mass murderer and we can be Mother Teresa, literally. But when we judge one another, then we hurt ourselves. We become fragmented.
Thank you so much for bringing us to that point of judgment and how that fragments us. You open your book, Josiane, with this quote, "Without context, there is no culture. Without culture, there are no people or connection." When I read that, I'm reassured on a lot of levels that everywhere you've been leading us, talking about becoming more present, becoming more conscious, becoming more aware, taking responsibility, that if I'm seeing something I don't like in you, it's a mirror. It's an invitation for me to examine what is triggering me, to be thankful of the trigger. These are all principles that we learn in compassionate inquiry that I'm excited to hear you reflecting in this work that you do with couples. There's 2 points I want to touch right now because we're talking about the African Holocaust. We're talking about generations of violence, sexual violence, physical violence, oppression. And you speak of this spirituality, love, sexuality link named the sacred link. You explored that in your book and your dissertation, that this may serve as a direct route to assess underlying mechanisms and promote couple resilience that support the expression of protective mutations in gene expression. We're talking about epigenetics now. We're talking about, instead of passing down trauma and it living and showing up in African populations, specifically women, in forms of asthma, for example, right? You're talking about the capacity of this sacred link to tap in and to heal that.
Yes.
Can you say more?
Yes. So what we've learned from the first time that we had an idea about intimacy, we might not have learned the details of what it is to be intimate. And we might have gotten from the media, all those different ways that are through technology, that to be intimate is to just have genital sex, plenty to follow the men, to follow their want, and to make sure as women, we might carry all the emotional burden in a dyad, in a couple relationship. And it comes back into the bedroom. It goes back in there. And then we're missing the most important part of what it is in our divine feminine power to actually be welcome for men or whatever partner we have to follow us, follow our breath. Breath is so important. The breath, when we follow the breath, we are more in tune and centered into multi-dimensions. When we come into our intimacy, we are changing all the messages that we receive from our society, that do it this way, do it this. No, it comes also in science, where at the beginning of scientists did some research on sexuality. They were interviewing one person, not the couple. And they were interviewing mostly prostitutes. and nothing against them, but there's so much more to know about how to let in and out our sacredness, our sacred sexuality, which is really to take the time. It's just like being in family therapy. We slow down. And that notion of slowing down scares people because this is in a world of capitalism, a society of consumerism and instant gratification. And so we get away from our essence and we stand so strongly in our ego that we lose sense of ourselves and we scared of the other because we are afraid almost to be eaten in a relationship. And there was one of the couples that one man who mentioned it's like being a microwave of generation. It's like it's instant and good, and it's not really good. It's actually very toxic and karmic to us, to our health, to our spirit, to our soul and body. Sacred link is there to actually get humans to slow down and understand that when you are in pain, don't try to be out of the pain. You go through the pain. You just enjoy crying. You can enjoy screaming. You are in pain. And it never stays a long time. When you allow yourself to go through it, not to skip it, not to put it under the rug or blame it on somebody else or a group. It could be not only a person, but a group of people or a nation. So once we understand that we are not machines, technology right now is trying to dehumanize us. We have to remember it's sacred link that we have to slow down in order to be and let from our felt heart, heartfelt sensation, emotion, what it is to be human and to let our divinity literally speak to the other person that's in front of us, to connect with them, to really see them, not to create another type of person that's in their deficit, not in their abundance. So compassionate love is not toxic positivity either, I have to mention. It's really to see super survivors. And I borrowed that from them to speak about the couples and to honor them. And I said, they're super survivors because when we experience trauma, so we can be traumatized from going the first day to school. We can be traumatized from giving birth. We can be traumatized from being sexually abused. We can be traumatized from so many things. Not everybody is going to be having symptoms in this current moment. And usually when they have symptoms, it's because they don't connect with the past. In the past and the ancestors, if you don't know where you're coming from, it's difficult to know how you stay centered, how you ground yourself, because those roots are not just you. They're from your ancestors who make who you are. And unless you have this acknowledgement, and that's why now in Florida, the nation, they're trying to ban books, history, African American history, because they know somehow that if you remember who you are, you're going to be so powerful. And that's why also I love the Jewish faith and culture, because they make sure you remember what happened to us. You remember the Holocaust. So the Holocaust is not the Jewish, it's actually the human Holocaust, right? The Native Indians went through an Holocaust, the Vietnamese, the Cambodian, the Rwandans, so many different populations went through the Holocaust. Some go back, bounce back to normalcy, a sense of normalcy when they go through a wound, they experience sometimes trauma. But there's a portion of humans that actually don't bounce back, they bounce forward. They thrive. They go one has that potentiality. It all depends on the choice that we make. And that's why it's important to know that the sacred link is not just in our relationship with someone else, it's also with ourselves. The relationship that we're holding and cultivating with ourselves. So there's a philosopher, a French philosopher, Voltaire, he says, we have to cultivate our own garden. Okay? Because when we cultivate our own garden, we're cultivating the garden of everybody else. That's the principle of wholeness and interconnectedness.
I'm going to take a moment to take all of that in, of what you just offered us, and just let that kind of rest in my body for a moment. The garden part, everything you said felt like a garden, like a lot of seeds planted. I see that our time is coming to a near end, and I wanted to take this opportunity, Josiane, to touch something that you said is happening in Florida. It's like a microcosm of a lot of things that are happening right now, just because, as you outlined, the context is really important. Our current context as we sit here with each other is one that in Florida, they're trying to ban books about history. 30,000 migrants stand to be sent to Guantanamo Bay, where terrorists are held. The Gulf of Mexico is now called the Gulf of America. On and on. There's no U.S. aid left. It's assassinated in a couple of weeks. This is our context right now. And I have a very personal interest in hearing this answer, but I also want to hear for our listeners, what can you leave us with, given this context and knowing what you know about the power of compassionate love, and that we can bounce forward in this time where we desperately need to be able to bounce forward, where we need to be awake and alive and breathing and not shut down and numb by this litany of things happening. What would you like to leave us with?
Okay. Wow, that's a big, yes. Everything is connected, right? So it's happening. It looks like we're going down, right? But it's actually every force in the universe has its opposite. So while the media, all the social media and whatnot are focusing on what's wrong, just know on the other side, in the silent space, they're not talking of what works. They're not talking of how we're doing well, how we're doing better, how emotionally, when you think, because all the world is mental, it's a big, imagine a big brain, and our brain, remember, are connected with each other. And when we're in a state of fight or flight, we are not in our essence. So we have to honor the truth, compassionate love, to create our heaven on earth. We have to remember that we can choose the truth. And when we see the truth, not to be scared, but to feel our courage in order to see the beauty in humankind and to reclaim our divine powers, our sacred link for the well-being of humanity. Because we are one soul with one role to love with compassion.
I get it. I get it. And I also really land with your message that the most direct and immediate application of this thing you just said belongs with my family, belongs with my most intimate relationships.
Yes, yes. And knowing that your relationship, when you're doing well, even when you're experiencing challenges, okay, doing well doesn't mean that everything is rosy, but it means that you choose to say, oh, okay, what does it mean about me that it's a reality that I'm creating right now? And I can definitely alchemize, change it. I can transform it. Okay. We all have that power. And it's just to remember. It's to remember who we are. That's the struggle right now. We are being shown only one facet of humanity, and it's not our divine selves. We have to remember that we are divine humans. Okay? We are divine humans.
All right. Let's get to that appreciative inquiry of ourselves. Let's get away from that deficit and toxic sort of sludge that we're being offered. And let's open it up to appreciative inquiry. What do we have? Because we have a lot, don't we?
We have so much. There's always something that can be better tended in your garden, right? Like the weeds. But before you take them away, then you have to see, okay, there was something underneath, and you look and you are being curious.
Curiosity. Thank you for closing on that. Curiosity is the medicine against judgment.
Yes.
Oh, I can't be more grateful for your words, your message, your wisdom in this time of incredible polarity and the invitation for reunification and for seeing myself everywhere I go.
Yes, everywhere. Yes. And it's not only in people, it's also in the 5 elements. The earth, the fire, the ether, the space, the water. So wherever you are, in front of me, I have the ocean. And with the ocean, every time, I just wish that every being is happy and free. Every time. And my wish encapsulates all the beings on earth. All the humans, all the plants and animals, every being on earth.
Dr. Josiane Bonté, thank you for being here on the Gifts of Trauma podcast. Thank you for your medicine to this world.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
If you've been listening to our podcast, you may have heard guests connect their birth experiences with enduring subconscious behavioral and emotional patterns. To help break this cycle, Compassionate Inquiry offers The Portal, a 28-week trauma-informed training for perinatal health professionals such as midwives, obstetricians, nurses, and doulas who want to empower their patients to trust their innate ability to birth, bond with, and nurture their child. To learn more and register, just follow the link in the show notes and register by March 3rd. The Gifts of Trauma is a weekly podcast that features personal stories of trauma healing, transformation, and the gifts revealed on the path to authenticity. Listen on Apple, Spotify, all podcast platforms. Rate, review, and share it with your clients, colleagues, and family. Subscribe and you won't miss an episode. Please note, this podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for personal therapy or a DIY formula for self-therapy.